Okay, in this video, we are going to install SiteAudit OnSite. Um, and this presumes that you've already read all the prerequisites, have the right operating system, which is essentially Windows 10, 11, Server 2016 or later. And if you go to the netaphor.com/download site, you'll see here that these are where we can get the downloads. Most people use a 64-bit version. I'm not even sure there's 32-bit versions of Windows available yet, but generally you'll go to the 64-bit version and click download for whatever language you want your installer to run in. Regardless of what language the installer's in, the software will run based on what your operating system language is. So I've already downloaded it. It's right here. So let's go ahead and start with the installation. Now, this presumes that we have a SQL server somewhere where we can create a database and all the prerequisites have been met. If they haven't, if you're missing, say, .NET Framework or something like that, which most people aren't, then you would be able to download it right here. So let's go ahead and click Next, Accept, and we select the monitoring service here by default. You can install for all users if you want to. Just click Next through each of these and do the install. And that's it. It's very fast, just a few seconds to install this. And once it's installed, I'll show you what you get. Here you'll see the SiteAudit Viewer icon. Here's the folder for this if you want. The software by default was installed on the C drive in the public Netaphor SiteAudit folder. Okay, and also we have different files installed in users public documents, Netaphor SiteAudit, and what you'll see in here is this is where the log files will be stored in case we needed to do troubleshooting or anything else like that. So that's the two main folders that are used. And then I want to show you the services panel. There is a service that gets installed. It's called Netaphor SiteAudit Monitor. If you notice, the startup type is automatic, which means that anytime the system reboots, the service is going to start automatically. That way you can be sure that the printers are being monitored all the time. There's one other important thing I want to point out here. There's two ways that the application can communicate with the SQL database. One is using SQL authentication and the other one's Windows authentication. If you are using Windows authentication, you will have to modify this logon as a service name. So you would just double click this or go to properties in this logon, and you'll have to enter in the account of the user that has DB owner access to the database. Okay, so that will be required, and we'll come back to this after install. All right, so what we want to do now is let's just start SiteAudit. And the first thing it's going to do is it's going to say that we need a license here. So we'll just hit OK, and it's going to give us this unique user ID. So we'll copy this, and this you'll paste and send it to licensing at netaphor.com to get your license. So don't paste this whole screenshot in here, just copy and paste the user ID, send it to get your license. Alternatively, if you are working with a partner that has access to a license, you may have been given a key file, which you can just point to here. But in our case, we're just going to generate a license here. Paste the license in here and hit OK. So now what the software is doing is it's going to look for a database. So we're going to have to connect it to a database. So we'll hit yes here. And by default, it assumes that you may have SQL Express installed and have used our prerequisites to do that. And so it should connect automatically. If If you have a SQL Server that a DBA set up for you or anything, you would enter in the SQL Server name here, the authentication type and user. We'll go through that in just a minute, but in this case, I do have SQL Express on this machine. If you notice, it's by default, it's looking for this database. Doesn't exist. We're going to create a new database. So we'll just call this SiteAudit and hit OK. And basically what it's doing is it's creating that database and installing the schema, preparing us to start collecting data. Okay, so it is finished. So we'll click OK here, and now we'll select our database. And from this point forward, it should automatically connect. So we'll hit OK. And now the application is connected to the SQL database. Okay, so we're going to want to go to Setup and Discovery, and here's where you'll enter in IP address ranges, or if you have networks to enter, you could enter them here. Or if you know specific device IP addresses or IP ranges, we could do something like enter in a range here of say 4.0 through 4.250. I'll do 54. If you have networks instead of ranges, you could enter in your networks, say something like, something like this. Okay, and then also here's where you would enter your SNMP community strings. By default, printers generally use public, but you could likely use something else. You'll want to make sure that's in here. And if you're using SNMP v3, you would enter those credentials in here. This type of information will be covered in more detail later. Basically, this video is just to get SiteAudit installed and just show you how it runs real quick. So we'll hit OK here. And then the next thing you'll do is you'll hit Start Monitoring, and SiteAudit will start collecting the data. So it's very simple. Okay, as I mentioned before, if we're using Windows authentication, then in the services, we have to enter the account of the user who has DB owner access to the database. So in this case, we're using local SQL Express. That was installed by our administrator. If we go over here and open logon, you can see we just entered the administrator account here. You'll likely use a service account or some other account that that has administrator access on the machine, and also as a DB owner of the SiteAudit database. So once that's been entered, then you can come over here and go to Tools and Start Monitoring. And you should see the monitoring service started. So let's come back over here. We could do a refresh. You can see it's running. So that's how we know the monitoring service is running. But generally, you don't need to look there. You could just come back up to the Tools menu. If it says Stop Monitoring, that means that it's already been started. Another thing you could do is you can come over here to the Task Manager, and you can look for SiteAudit monitoring service in here. Here's our viewer, and here's the monitoring service, so we know it's running. Okay. So at this point, SiteAudit's going out. It's looking at the discovery that we configured, this network, and this range, and it's looking for devices. We can go to the inventory view, which is right here. There's a little icon for each of the primary views, or you could just come up here and go to inventory, and you can see it's already started collecting data. And the time span up here, it shows the very first time that SiteAudit ever collected data and the last time. So you could see it's been running for about 30 seconds. It started collecting data at 11:12:13 a.m. and it's currently 11:12:43 a.m. If I click refresh, you can see this one's going to freeze, and this here will keep on updating as data gets collected. As you can see, we have a few devices coming in here. Okay. All right, so it looks like everything's running well. So that's it for this video.